All right, so we just finished East Asia. Now we're moving into our Southeast Asia unit. So our first country is going to be Vietnam. Okay. Um, it's a little different for us being in I would say, a cultural hub for Vietnamese people in where we live on the West Coast. But for the most part, I think the knowledge and impression that most Westerners, or at least Americans, have of Vietnamese people or Vietnamese culture is based on political events that shaped the country's history during the 20th century. Unfortunately, this has left the really rich and diverse culture of the Vietnamese people relatively unexplored for most of America. The Vietnamese are proud of their long-lived civilization and traditions. Okay, and this is really true when it comes to their culinary heritage. Okay, sorry. Vietnam's land area is approximately 127,000 square miles, so it's slightly smaller than Japan and about three-quarters the size of California, if you wanted to use an American reference. Um, there's a lot of information on your study guide about the specific geography of Vietnam and how it's different between the north, the central, and the south. Just be aware that in the north and in the south, there's really fertile deltas where they can grow rice. And this long stretch of narrow mountainous coastal land, we can make some conclusions about that, right? There's lots of mountains, there's lots of coast. We already know how those things affect what ingredients can be used. So think about that. Um, I don't want to give you the wrong impression about Vietnamese food because it is 100% unique to them. But we're going to talk about how the influence of China and France over their history has really affected the cuisine in specific ways. So, from its beginnings as a distinct nation, Vietnam has been strongly influenced by China. There was 10 centuries, 1,000 years of Chinese rule over Vietnam, which introduced things such as Confucianism, um, art and architecture, and most long-lasting and profound is probably the introduction of Buddhism. Okay, so Buddhism led to the development of a lot of really incredible vegetarian cuisines or a lot of incredible use of vegetables, right? That has a lot of variety, complexity, and taste. That's a big thing that comes from Chinese influence. On top of that, there's also things like uh, use of woks. They use some of the Chinese staples such as soy sauce or tofu or noodles, right? But the big thing is Vietnamese people have kept their native culture and assimilated Chinese influence rather than adopting it completely, right? So you'll notice that there are some similarities to China, but they don't do things the Chinese way. They do it the Vietnamese way, right? And they're very, very good at what they do. Again, um, Vietnamese gastronomy, or like the idea of food culture, has owed a great deal to France, which ruled the century from 1859, or ruled the country from 1859 to 1954. Okay, so you'll find a lot of French influence in Vietnamese food. And again, I don't want to get it twisted. The Vietnamese food culture is not one that owes anything to France as far as like how they develop flavor or anything like that. What you'll see is that there's some similar techniques or styles of food, but they're done completely in a Vietnamese way, right? The French implanted a passion for coffee, French bread, milk, butter, yogurt, and ice creams, um, lots of types of desserts. And you'll also see as we move into the specific types of foods that we're going to look at, the notable dishes of Vietnam. Some of them are pretty similar to French food as far as their presentation, right, or their makeup. But the flavoring ingredients and the true technique behind it is always pretty distinctly Vietnamese. I really want to remind you of all that. There are influences from other cultures, but Vietnamese food is totally its own flavor profile and totally created, crafted, and just built up by the Vietnamese people. Okay, they took some things from other cultures, but they really, really did it their own way. Okay, so one of the most characteristic elements in Southeast Asian cuisine, but also specifically Vietnamese food, is nuoc mam or fish sauce, right? It's a salty, pungent sauce that comes from fermented small anchovies. So you see those are the fish right there. Um, it's used for seasoning food and flavoring food because it's quite salty. So you'll find it replaces salt in a lot of applications in Vietnamese food. Okay, and it fits so purely into the flavor profile when we talk about what the really important flavoring ingredients are. Um, each thing adds its own element, right? Its own taste. So fish sauce is like the salty, and then we'll talk about palm sugar, which is their sweet, and then like kaffir lime or other types of citrus is the sour, right? So we're all still trying to balance those flavors, those tastes, right? Salty, sweet, spicy, sour, pungent. Um, but they do it with their own ingredients, and they all lend into that flavor profile. Okay, commercially, fish sauce is made by um, layering lots of fresh anchovies with salt, and then allowing them to ferment in these giant barrels. Okay, you'll see that there's a spigot on the barrel, which is opened and the sauce is drained out. Um, and then it's actually so after they run the liquid out the first time, they'll actually pour it back and allow it to ferment for a few more months. So in total, it ferments about 6 months, and then the fish sauce is drained and processed in bottles and bottled. Okay, like olive oil or any type of really well made liquid like this, there's different grades to fish sauce. So the best fish sauce is obtained from the first drainage they make, and it's amber and very dark and probably the cleanest tasting fish sauce there is. Usually quite expensive, but then um, there's other grades of fish sauce that are a little bit lower based on when they were drained, basically. So the first drainage always the most expensive and the highest quality. Okay. So what we make with nuoc mam is nuoc cham, right? Which is a really invigorating dipping sauce that can be used to spice up or season any type of Vietnamese food. Okay. There are some variations, right? So each cook kind of has their own formula for it, but I think that the basic things are fish sauce, lime juice, either garlic and or scallion, Thai chili, and palm sugar, and then some water to dilute. Those are the big things. And of course, this is in your study guide, and we'll talk about it a lot. But um, other things can be added to it, but that's kind of the base, what's most prevalently found. Um, and yeah, you'll see this a lot of times in any Vietnamese restaurant around here. Okay, so this is that's how they make it, and it's a mainstay on the Korean table or the Vietnamese table. Okay. So let's go into some flavoring ingredients, right? We talked about the salty, which is the fish sauce. That's their salt. Now we're going to talk about their sweet. Okay. Palm sugar is a type of sugar derived from any type of palm tree. So sometimes you'll see like coconut palm sugar because that comes from the coconut palm tree. Okay. But really, what it is you can see a guy doing it here. Is they collect the sap. This is kind of a makeshift model where he's doing it with an old bottle, but they collect the sap, they cook it down until it's thick, right? Until all that water is evaporated and all that's left is the sugar, and then they dry it into these bricks, right? These are different types of palm sugar right here. So palm sugar is a little bit deeper in flavor than what we would normally see in our refined granulated sugar, right? That's just purely sweet. Palm sugar has some, I would say, a little bit of umami to it, right? If we talk about, if we look from what we learned about in Japan, what that sense of umami is, there's a little bit of that in palm sugar. But again, it's just a little deeper. It's darker in color, obviously, because it's somewhat unrefined. Yeah, and there's a little more complexity to it. Okay. So we talked about salty and sweet. Now we're going to talk about spicy, and the main spicy element in Vietnamese food is Thai chilies, right? So they're intensely hot. They're very hot, spicy, small chilies that are commonly used in Southeast Asia, right? Obviously, they're called Thai chilies, so we're going to see it a lot when we go to Thailand. But yeah, every other Southeast Asian culture uses them. They're either green or red. I still don't know which one's spicier. I don't know if they are. Usually, red peppers are spicier because they're held on the plant longer and then they turn red. Um, it all kind of has to do with how much they're being watered. Like you don't really water hot chilies much. You just kind of let the sunlight do its job, and you water it a little bit just to keep it growing. But yeah, they're extremely hot, and they're used a lot just for heat and Southeast Asian cooking. They do have good flavor too, so it's not just a pure spice. There is a good pepper flavor on top of it too, so it has flavor, not just heat. So I think the main starches on top of rice in Vietnam would be rice paper and rice noodles. So it is a heavily used rice culture, and they do use it in different ways. These are kind of thicker rice noodles, but if you look in the middle, we'll often see things called vermicelli, and that's kind of that vermicelli noodle, but it's really the thin rice noodle. And then also we have rice paper. So rice paper is translucent, thin sheets of rice flour dough. They're usually sold dry, right? If not always sold as dried sheets. You rehydrate them in water to soften before using them, and then you can use them up. Like usually they're used for those Vietnamese style summer rolls or salad rolls that are served with dipping sauces, right? That's the most common thing. Hey, it's even right there. I didn't even notice. Right underneath it. Those are the kind of rolls we're talking about. But rice noodles are also made from rice flour. Okay, they can either be thick or thin, like they are in this picture, and they can be used for soups or stir fried dishes or cold kind of salad dishes too, right? So they're very versatile. Okay, so we talked about other flavoring components, but now this is a big one here. The kaffir lime, and even more importantly, probably the leaf. So it's a type of citrus fruit from Southeast Asia. Kind of looks like I always thought it looks like a brain or something because it's so bumpy. But they're really known for their intense aroma. The skins and the fruit can be used, but I think the most commonly used part that we see in Vietnamese food across the board, across the world, is the kaffir lime leaf, right? So the lime leaf is intensely aromatic, and we use it as an herb the same way you would use like rosemary or something. It's used for infusion, right? It's a hard herb, hard resinous herb is what we call that. So it's not something that you can really just eat by itself. It needs to be infused, and then you discard it, right? You wouldn't just eat the lime leaf. It's not a good texture, but it has great flavor. Okay. Um, Again, they're not edible, but they're used to infuse flavor into like stir fried dishes, soups, sauces, anything where you want that kaffir aroma. It's very, very interesting, very perfumy and pleasurable aroma, right? The first time you smell it, I think for the most part, everyone enjoys the way it smells. So galangal is an aromatic. It's a root, right? You can see it kind of growing here. There's where the stalks are coming out. It's very similar to ginger. Okay, so in East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, right, you see a lot of ginger, you see a lot of turmeric, and you'll see a lot of galangal because they all grow in this kind of form, right? They all kind of look like this. They're all roots. They all do well in that climate. Galangal is the one we're going to focus on in this unit. It kind of has the aroma and taste of ginger, but it's far more complex, and I would say earthy and pungent and a little bit musty, to be honest. It's not like just clean spice fragrance like ginger. It has a little bit more depth to it. Okay, so we'll see a lot of those roots in these Southeast Asian cultures. Ginger, this one galangal, and then you also see turmeric. And if you didn't know, most of the time we see turmeric in its dried powder form, but it is a root, just like galangal and ginger. It's just it looks like that, but really orange. Okay, so the Vietnamese food culture is one that uses so many herbs, right? There are a lot of food cultures in the world that really heavily focus on herbs. Actually, where my family's from, Iranian food culture is another one. I think those are two really big ones in the world where you just eat herbs as a part of the meal, right? It's not something as like a little flavoring thing. It's like we wrap our stuff in herbs. We use a lot of herbs when we eat stuff. It's just there. Okay, so these are the three big ones that I thought of that are more or less known to most people, right? So we know about cilantro and mint and Thai basil, right? Those are simple, and we'll go over them in class too. But these are the ones that we probably don't know about. First off, saw leaf or culantro. It's a commonly used herb. It's sometimes used as an alternative cilantro, but it has a stronger taste. It's called saw leaf. This is kind of a far picture. It's not a great example of it too, but if you look at the edges of them, there's kind of like serrated like a saw. So that's why it's called saw leaf. It's also called culantro in other cultures. Okay. Rao ram, which is kind of like a Vietnamese mint. It's not a member of the mint family, but it has a somewhat similar appearance. I would say it's kind of a stretch to say that it looks like mint, but it does have a pretty similar fragrance. Okay, so some people may call it Vietnamese mint, but it's also referred to more commonly as Rao Ram. Okay, and then the last one is betel leaf or heart leaf. If you look right here, that one looks like a heart, right? So that's why it's called that. They're glossy, heart-shaped leaves that grow on a vine, and they're most commonly used to wrap things and cook. So like you'll have like betel leaf wrapped grilled meat, and you can eat that with rice or with a dipping sauce or something, right? The other two are used fresh, right? Betel leaf is okay. So let's get into notable dishes. This is the most famous Vietnamese dish around the world, no question, hands down. So pho is usually, for the most part, a beef-based rice noodle soup. So the broth is made by slowly simmering beef bones, like bones with really high collagen and gelatin content too, like knuckle bones and femurs and stuff like that. Okay, so so the femur bone has a lot of bone marrow in it too, right? So they use a lot of bones that have high collagen and high gelatin and usually some bone marrow involved because that makes a really delicious broth. They flavor it with star anise, sometimes clove and cinnamon, but star anise is the big one. And charred vegetables go in there to flavor and to color the broth. If you didn't put any charred vegetables, that broth would come out white because it's just beef bones. But the charred onion and charred garlic and ginger and daikon, that that char will actually give it that kind of golden hue to it. So it has the star anise, the beef, the charred vegetables, and a whole lot of fish sauce. Okay, fish sauce is used to season it. The broth and noodles are put in the bowl, rice noodles, and topped with different types of thinly sliced raw or cooked beef products. Usually sliced onions, herbs are added on top too, and then you can find bean sprouts, chilies, segmented lime, things like that served alongside with it. Lots of herbs, right? Again, it's a huge herb culture. So you'll see that Thai basil or cilantro or sometimes mint involved. Pho is served with condiments on the side to either dip your toppings into or slightly flavor your broth. I think it's somewhat looked down upon for people to just dump hoisin sauce and sriracha into their pho broth. That's usually a sign of I wouldn't say disrespect, but like not really paying tribute to what the broth really is. And it's supposed to be this clear, light thing that's already really well made. You're only adding maybe a little bit of chili to it, or a little bit of vinegar, or a little bit of fish sauce, or maybe a little hoisin. But you don't want to completely change what it is. Um, if I'm eating a good bowl of pho, I really don't put anything in it unless there are some like house-made condiments that are suggested to go with it. But maybe I'm just a purist. Okay, but that's pho. Most of us have had it before. If you haven't, you should. Very good meal. So these we're talking about these vermicelli noodles now, the thin rice noodles, and you often hear the term bun, and bun just means noodle in Vietnamese. We're specifically talking about the bun thit nung, which is the more iconic rice noodle dish that you see a lot here. The cold rice noodles topped with various vegetables and grilled pork, and garnishes like ground peanuts or fried shallots or herbs or pickles or anything like that, right? It's served with nuoc cham, so you pour that over to flavor the noodles, and it's a really refreshing cold meal, right? If we think about the Southeast Asian climate, it's super hot and humid. It can get sweltering at times, and you need to eat things that are refreshing to kind of save you from that heat, right? And this is one of those things. So you'll find a lot of really good, bright, healthy, um, colder dishes in Vietnamese food and in Southeast Asian food in general because of the crazy heat and humidity. But yeah, bun thit nong. Okay, ban sao. So the first time I had this, it blew my mind. It's a crispy version of a crepe, and it's a Vietnamese version, right? So when we talk about that French influence, like okay, here we go. Here's one aspect of it. The French people have crepes, and then this is what the Vietnamese people did with that knowledge, right? They made their own version of it, which is intensely crispy, cooked in a good amount of oil, and it's made brightly yellow by using turmeric, right? So turmeric powder is added to make it yellow. Its crepe batter again is with rice flour rather than wheat flour, so it's Vietnamese ingenuity to a French technique. And even more so than that, there is specific bon sao flour, right? That's made specifically for this. So you buy that flour to make this dish. Okay. The name bon sao specifically is referring to the sizzling sound that the batter makes when it's fried in a skillet. The sao, right? The sizzle. Uh, there are usually like bean sprouts or shrimp or some type of meat cooked into it, and then it's folded over, showing the crispy sides. And it's eaten by you take a bit of it, you wrap it in salad greens with a lot of herbs, and then you dip it into your nuoc cham. Again, it goes to show like Vietnamese culture, super bright, refreshing food. Even when there is something fatty and oily and crispy, it's balanced with uh, with bright acidity and a little bit of sweetness and fresh, crunchy vegetables, herbs, leaves, stuff like that. Okay. So I think this is another one, just like pho, that a lot of us know about. Banh mi specifically is just referring to bread, but it's synonymous with the sandwich. So banh mi is a sandwich made with that type of short Vietnamese baguette, right? This is the banh mi bread. Okay, really crusty on the outside. It's usually shorter, and it's nice and fluffy on the inside. But it has a definite crusty outside. That's like the big iconic thing to a banh mi to me is that the bread is really crusty on the outside, really soft on the inside. Um, so yeah, the banh mi refers to the Vietnamese baguette sandwich. It can be filled with any variety of Vietnamese meats and vegetables. So a lot of times you'll see like there's a lot of sausages in Vietnamese food culture, type of force meats like mince meats, terrines you would call them in French, and a lot of times you'll find that. But you could also find grilled meat, grilled pork, grilled chicken, whatever, and vegetables. So usually pickled carrots and daikon is added to there. That's a big one that I see, and then sliced jalapenos or sliced chilies, and then a ton of herbs. So a common variety would have the Vietnamese meat, herbs, pickled carrot and daikons, chilies, and then it would have a couple French items too. So it would maybe have a liver pate, which is like a smooth paste made from liver, or mayonnaise, right? Mayonnaise is intensely French. So there's another aspect of that fusion cuisine, French style baguette with maybe mayonnaise or pate in there, but all the flavoring ingredients on top of that are profoundly Vietnamese. Okay. All right. So again, this is another one of the Vietnamese dishes that I had where it blew my mind. I just didn't know this was a part of the culture at all. So Ko, the KHO, refers to braising or stewing something in Vietnamese, right? But Kakato, which I'm butchering, I have no idea how to say it, is specifically a style of braised fish, usually catfish, cooked in a clay pot. And it's so good because it's intensely aromatic. There is a ton of ginger, there is a ton of garlic, there are chilies, there's fish sauce, um, coconut water, lime, and then caramelized sugar is what it gets that color from. So it's sweet, it's really aromatic, it's salty, it could be a little spicy, and it's served piping hot in this clay pot, the same pot that it's cooked in, right? It comes straight out of the oven onto a plate and then out to you in that clay pot, and it comes bubbling and simmering and steaming. It's really good. Uh, you eat it over rice. Again, if you've never had this, if there's a Vietnamese restaurant that you like, I would look for this on the menu and order it. It's so good. So this is what I'm gonna make on Monday. Again, ko is the word for stewing or braising. Bo ko, so bo is beef, is a type of beef stew. Okay, so again, beef stew is like a really French thing, but the way we see it in Vietnamese food is totally unique. So it's the beef is seared and stewed in a flavorful liquid of lemongrass, garlic, ginger, star anise, fish sauce, soy, and then there's usually like tomato paste or a tomato product added as well, which again is another thing that's a French technique, right? So the stew is simmered slowly until the beef is tender and the flavors are fully infused. And then the finished stew is usually topped with julienne onions and Vietnamese herbs. Okay, traditionally it's eaten with a side of baguette and maybe some more herbs, right? So you see that right there. But also over time, it's been served with rice, or it turns into like a kind of a noodle soup with rice noodles or egg noodles. Um, but the OG way, I would say, is probably with a side of baguette. Okay, I'm gonna make this on Monday. I'm gonna make it with noodles. And then the last one we'll talk about is bolak lak, or shaking beef. Um, it's called that because of the way the beef sizzles in a hot pan as it's seared, right? Shaking beef. Um, it's tender beef usually, right? So it's not like a really tough cut. It's a tender piece of the meat, marinated in soy, sugar, and garlic before being sauteed at really high heat. The cooked beef is actually seasoned with a vinaigrette, right? So a vinaigrette is a vinegar-based dressing. So it's soy sauce, rice vinegar, and fish sauce. And sometimes they'll like put it in the pan as well as it's finished cooking. A little bit of vinegar and then some butter. And once it's cooked, the beef is served on salad greens with fresh vegetables alongside that vinegar sauce, that vinaigrette as well. Okay. So it can be eaten just like that with the greens, or you can have it with rice, which is pretty common. But this is another thing that I think is a pretty important Vietnamese dish. Okay. And then last but not least, Pho Aroma, the goat. So one of my really good friends, his family built this restaurant when we were all in high school. Okay, and it's in West Seattle, um, on Delridge Way. And if I were you and I ever had the time or I was able to, I would go eat here as soon as possible. Okay, I think this is a great place to get a good representation of legit Vietnamese food in America. Um, This is where I cut my teeth. As someone who didn't really know anything other than pho, I came here and they just blew my mind with all the different dishes. Okay, I can't say enough good things. I share it with everyone I know. I just think that, especially, it's just important for me to bring this up, especially since this is our unit in class right now. I just think this is such a good place for you to go and try it out. So if you ever have the time, if you're ever able to, if you're ever in West Seattle, go to Pho Aroma. All right. But other than that, that's it. Okay. So that's all we got for now. We'll start our unit on Monday and then I'll cook something for you. So that's it. Have a good weekend.